My name is David Guire. I'm Assistant Curator at Pontypridd Museum. I'm standing here in front of the mining display at the museum, and it's a reminder of how important coal mining is or was in the history of South Wales itself. It's no exaggeration to say that South Wales is actually built on coal, both geologically and historically. There would be no South Wales as we know it today without the mining industry. But if we delve a bit deeper into the history of the area, you'll be able to see how important coal mining was.
By the 1700s, the Industrial Revolution was strongly underway. Coal was replacing charcoal as the choice fuel for smelting, and machinery made it possible to produce huge amounts on demand. As rail and canal networks developed, coal extracted with the use of steam power was exported all over Wales. Due to this, the cities of Cardiff, Swansea and Newport experienced exponential population growth. With a steady increase in output and manpower, the Welsh coal industry was at its peak during the 20th century and was producing over 50 million tonnes of coal per year.
My name is Roy Jones. I started work in number 9 colliery in Tidalstown in 1960, where there was no baths. You had to go home and bath. Conditions were appalling. It was a long, long walk to the face, about 2.5 miles, up and downhill, hot and cold, till we reached the coal face. I was 15 years old. I had just left school when I started in number 9 colliery. And then we moved to Mardy, and I worked on the coal face for about 28 years. And when I was 46, Mardy colliery shut down. And that was the last colliery in the Rhondda. I was one of 5 children. 2 of us were in the colliery, and my father, but he used to work on the surface because he had pneumoconiosis. We'd be up at 5:30 in the morning for work, and we used to catch a bus down to Tidalstown first, where we had to go to work in our working clothes because there was no baths there. Work all day underground and then take baths, which made a big difference. I know some colliery in we didn't, but in this colliery in Louismouth, I believe they had cats underground here. But I heard once that they didn't used to live long. We'd go through the baths, get changed, then go into the lamp room where we pick out our lamps, and later on we had to wear respirators as well. But in the early days we had to wear just a cigarette before going down. After having our last cigarette, we'd get searched on top of the pit to see if we had any contraband, like more cigarettes, matches or lighters. The banksman would receive a knock of 3 from underground, which he would knock back 3, which is safe for men to get in the carriage. Then he would knock for it to go down the pit. When it was safe to get in the cage, the banksman would motion us to get in. And when it's on the top, keps, used to call them, used to come underneath the carriage to hold it dead level, so minecars could come in and out. Where the winder was for the pit, nobody was allowed in there apart from the man on the pit. And we'd go down the pit and they'd be travelling roughly about one going down, one coming up, passing each other at 50 feet a second each. In Mardy, there'd be different landings, like the yellow, red and blue. I used to get out mostly in the yellow, which would be about 300 metres down. We get down, we'd make our way into the face, which was a long, long way in. And halfway through, walk underneath the mountain every day to meet up with us, and we'd walk onto the face together. There would be about 300 men walking underneath the mountain every morning.
Well, when I was a kid, I learned to play trombone. I lived in Ferndale, and because I played the trombone, lamp on a Friday, I was told that this is the lamp that you'll have, this is the way you will work. You'll go underground 7 o'clock the following Monday morning, and started work. We weren't required to wear helmets then. We had cloth caps. Went underground, and the experience I remember was waiting on top of the pit to go down the shaft, because the pits are into a cage, about 20 men or whatever, going down into a cage. Very, very inexperienced, of course. Although my father was a miner, my grandfather was miners. I came from a mining stock, of course. I was very, very nervous, if you like, when you got a pit bottom. You got out to the cage, and as you got out to the cage, the older men would say, stay where you are, because the horse is coming out. And then what I didn't realise was how far you had to walk. You had to walk a long, long way. And I always felt a pity for men that worked underground, who were older men who suffered from what they call a miner's disease, pneumoconiosis. They had to walk such a distance to come out from the coalface. Here at Lewismouth, there is what they call a north-south. North Main there towards Ennisable, South Main there towards Tonnerevan. So we had to walk a long way. Inexperienced, not tired because it's the beginning of the shift, walking with older men, and then getting to the coalface. Most of my life at the coalface was spent in a seam that was never higher than 3'6" to 4 feet high. And when I say that to some people, I think I can understand. You actually worked at the face, but you had to crawl up the face, because the coalface was about 200 yards long. So as I just mentioned, about 12 seams of coal underground of various thicknesses, some from 3'6" high up to 9 feet. Most of the seams I worked in, as I've already said, were thin seams, as they say. But when I started work, there were sidings full of trucks of timber that had come up from Cardiff, and we were taught by all other colliers, we were taught by the older men how to cut timber roof supports. And then gradually, then I worked in coal faces much later on, where you had water problems. You had higher seams, and you had a lot of water. Sometimes you went into a coal face, there'd be pumps working all night. By the time you got into the face, you were crawling in water. You were crawling in water, and the water was coming on top of you. In the very beginning, they had furnaces underground to draw the air to them. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. And then they brought in ventilation fans and pumps and things. Things got better. And then they had booster fans underground. Where there was a ventilation problem, they'd have booster fans, enormous things. And they'd be making sure the air was appropriate, you know, for the coalface. Yeah. When I started in Lewismouth, there were about 5 or 6 horses. Horses have gradually been phased out. We knew the names of the horses. I gradually knew the name of the horses. The man in charge of the horses was the harrier. These horses worked underground right through the year. But the horses, we always felt a pity for the horses. So when we came out, at least we were going up the shaft. But the horses did not come up. They came up once a year. So when I was a little boy, before I started working in pit, my father was working as what we call a banksman. That's a man that worked at the surface of the pit, where the coal came up, and where we went down. And went down to the top of the pit, and he said to me, stand out of the way, make sure you're out of the way. And then the coal was coming up. And as soon as the cages came up, it hit these enormous gates up. And then the coal was pushed out, or an empty drum came around, pushed the full one out, and the full one went down around to what they call a weighing machine, where it was weighed, and then it went to a place where the coal was separated from the stonework. You know. So it all depended on what they call piecework. when you were down the pit, you went with a collier, you were a trainee, or what they call a collier's boy, okay? And the quicker you worked, the more money you were paid at the end of the week. So if the collier had a good boy working with him, then the collier would reward the boy with trumps. The collier was paid on piecework, and we were paid according to the work that we put in.
The Caledonian Mercury in 1821 wrote that the sun never sets in the British Empire and her dominions. The British horns of a dilemma. The Royal Navy was moving from sail to steam. After extensive trials lasting the 1840s on every regional coal in the UK, South Wales steam coal was chosen as the best coal. The Admiralty report on steam coal in 1851 changed South Wales forever. This one decision witnessed a rapid expansion in the South Wales mining industry. Steam coal was the empire's lifeblood. As W.S. Jevons described it in 1865, coal stands in truth not beside, but entirely above other commodities. It is the material energy of the country, the universal aid, and a factor in everything we do. So central was this fuel to the British Navy, State and Empire, lumps of steam coal were referred to during the period as black diamonds. Unlike diamonds, however, coal's value was not monetary. The cost of coal was far below any precious stone. Indeed, coal was often used as a return cargo as its price was so low. Yet without it, the Royal Navy would be unable to fulfil its global role as the primary defence of British commerce and possessions. And thus, to Britain, coal's worth was immeasurable. How to fulfil the growing demands of the British Empire from the heavily wooded valleys of South Wales became the burning question. I'm standing next to two men who have answered that question, W.S. Clark and Sir W.T. Lewis. These men helped develop and plan and run Cardiff docks in the second half of the 19th century and witnessed it become one of the greatest ports in the world. Cardiff into a vital deep water port. Cardiff's built West Dock opened in 1839 and in 1855, signalled by the first historic train load of Rhondda steam coal arriving, the East Dock was finally opened. This ports, with Cardiff and Barry handling more coal than any other port in the world. As Cardiff became one of the world's great coal ports, the Cardiff Coal Exchange opened its doors in the 1880s. The Coal Exchange provided a dedicated location for merchants, traders to sell their coal, and followed the construction of similar buildings adorning the trading hall. The luxurious coal exchange at one point set the price of coal fully on the trading floor. And during the peak hour between midday and 1 o'clock, the floor might have as many as 200, and often a handshake would seal a deal. It's estimated up to 4.
My name is Valerie Thomas, and I was born and brought up in Mardy, in a terraced house where I lived until I married and moved away from Mardy. I'm back in Mardy now, this almost 19 years, and I'm 74 years of age, so everything I've spoken about I have lived through. And I am standing here by this school desk, and I can remember when I was a little girl, my father made a desk like this for me, and I was so thrilled, and I couldn't believe that my father was so clever as he wasn't a carpenter, he was a fitter by trade. I was brought up in a little village called Mardy. I lived in a terraced house. My father would get up early to go to work. Then later, my mother would get me up from bed and always made sure that I had a good breakfast before going to school. I started school when I was 5 years of age. I loved school, and although I learnt a lot, I was a bit of a talker. And I can remember coming home one day and saying to my mother, "Oh, Miss Jones said that I'm a champion talker." And my mother had to explain to me that that was not a good thing. When I was young, wash days were a big thing. I think my mother, she had what we called a washing board, where she had green soap and it was rubbed over the clothes and then rubbed up and down on this ridged board. It was very hard. No spin dryers, no washing machines, but that was it. My mother cleaned with a stiff sweeping brush, no cleaner, and my mother didn't have a cleaner until, a Hoover, until I was what? I had to be about 8, because I think by the time my brother was born, who was 9 years younger than me, we did have a cleaner then, and we also had hot and cold water, which a lot of houses still didn't. We had a tin bath that used to hang on a hook out in the backyard. It was brought in. We didn't have baths every day as you do now. It was 2, maybe 3 times a week in front of the fire. My grandfather worked underground in the pit. They only had cold running water. The water used to be boiled in this boiler tank thing at the side of the fire, and my grandfather would come home from work filthy dirty, and his clothes were taken off and put on paper on the floor, and then he would bath in front of the fire. We were lucky in our home because by the time my father went back to work in the pit, it was in Mardy Colliery, and they, I think, were one of the first collieries to have pit head baths. My mother was particular about eating, and we had nutritious food, fresh veg in the summer from the allotment. Every week, meat, fish. We did eat very well. We lived, it was just my mother, my father and myself until my brother was born. My grandparents lived in another street in Mardy. Both sets, as it happens, lived in the same street. But lots of my friends, they lived with grandparents. We didn't, but a lot of my friends did.
Coal mining was a family story. It linked very much to everybody living in a miner's cottage, whether they worked underground or were working above ground, either in the house or in a shop or in a school as a teacher as well. So this is a profession which brings the entire family together, and meant that every shift, when the men and the boys went underground, there was this sense of trepidation, this fear that something, anytime, could go wrong on any given moment. It was also an extremely dangerous profession, coal mining. lots of potential for disasters underground, from roof falls to explosions to the coal drams crashing into each other and catching hands and other limbs. And this led to a series of famous disasters over the years, from Senghenydd in 1913 to Aberfan in 1966, and of course the Albion disaster in 1894. Each of them with massive loss of life, really. They all have a cost for men and boys and young children, particularly in Aberfan. And so we can see in the connections between Aberfan in 1966, when that was a disaster which engulfed a school, to the Albion disaster in 1894 and the Senghenydd disaster in 1913, both of which claimed a large number of children and young people. That this is an industry which was dangerous for all parts of society. The Albion disaster, which is even today somewhat forgotten, despite the fact it was the most severe disaster in South Wales in the 19th century. It's the same kind of bit of the coal seam as Senghenydd, so this has this kind of explosive character, and it's not the only disaster that takes place at the pit in that period either. The disaster takes place on a really quiet Saturday afternoon, the 23rd of June, 1894. It's coming near to the end of the shift, so the miners are still working, but they're gearing down, they're getting ready to go home. Their families back at home are maybe looking through the window, waiting for their loved ones to come up out of the mines for their Saturday afternoon tea. And that moment, that eerie silence, in a kind of way, presages the disaster that's to come. About 4 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon, the explosion begins. But why does it begin? There's not really a great deal of certainty as to why the Albion colliery did explode on that particular afternoon. All we know is that the explosion happened and that its effects were enormous and significant for the community of Killarney. The explosion is heard all around Killarney, and those off shift race to the pit head with all of the equipment that they might need to begin a rescue underground. They take with them tools, they take with them a canary. The canary is more susceptible to the gases underground, and so there's a kind of early warning signal that there's danger in the area of the mine that the mine is going into. But the scenes that they find underground are harrowing. There's bodies, there's debris all underground. And it's enough for them to try and rescue as many of the bodies that they can, to bring them back to the surface for a proper burial. And sheeting on a stretcher brought up onto the surface, where the families have to go through the experience of identifying as best they can who the victims might be. The disaster claimed the lives of 290 men and boys, the youngest of whom was 13 years old, and the oldest was 60. Of the 125 horses that were underground, only 2 survived, so 123 lost their lives, which is a remarkable figure. And then there were 350 fatherless children, and as many as 150 widows left on the surface.
started the shift. Obviously you went to the baths and changed into different clothes to go down the pit, go to the lamp room. You had checks, lamp checks, to take your lamp to go down, and when you come back up then obviously you put your lamp back on and take your lamp check and put it for tomorrow. Shower, then the rest of the day then was, you know, went home and had your meal, and the social life for us at that age was fantastic. Sunday night then was down the club because there was shows on. The club opened 12 till 2 in the afternoon, midday, and then 6 till 10 on the night. And if you weren't there at 6 to half past, you wouldn't get a seat in the hall where the show was on. Well, there was individual artists and there were groups. More often than not, they'd have a three-piece group and a drummer, and everybody would like the drummer to do a drum solo. Going back to the clubs, etc., a lot of the elder members say when they retired, when they got made redundant, they'd spend a lot of the time in the club. Beer was very cheap then, like 5 pence a pint. They'd have cards and dominoes. You had a domino board with your 2 little pins, and of course everybody smoked. Most of the old miners, older smoked, you know. Through the week, that's where a lot of us used to go, you know, and we had dart leagues. Each club or pub, you'd have a league, like you'd have a football league in our team, 12, 14. Of course, you play this week and next week, then you take a choice. Personally, I played rugby on a Saturday, and kick-off then used to be 3 o'clock. But of course, if you were playing away, then that was a different, you want to be there that much sooner. Like, we go to the other valleys, Aberdare valleys and the Rhymney valleys, all over the place. On a home match, when you were in the shower, one of the committee men would put a 10-bob note in your boot, and the following week then, they'd want 5 shillings back to pay for the bus to go to the away match, like. Of course, 10 bob in the 50s was a handsome amount. And when I got too old for playing rugby, the bum started hurting. I said, enough is enough. And talked it over with the wife. And she said, well, we got a young child at the moment, so I'm not quite willing for you to join the choir as of yet. So when my daughter was 10, I joined the choir and went in for a voice test. And he said, right, pitch me a song of your choice. So I pitched him a song of choice, which I can't remember now because 35 years ago. And he said, yes, you can join the choir. He said, but I want you to come back after Christmas. He said, practice with your colleagues and come back at the restart in January. Well, I went back in January and voice test, there we are, he said. Look what 6 weeks I've done, he said. I never rehearsed a note with the voice on it. What's it? And next March, be 35 years in the choir. When I joined, there was 120 members. But now we're down to about 60 odd. We got rehearsal tomorrow night, which is Thursday night. And Saturday we're in Llandyssil, down West Wales. Next Thursday, week Thursday, we're in Park and Dare on our annual concert.
When I am down and oh my soul so weary, when troubles come melody. And I am still and waiting in the silence until you come and sit a while with me. You raise me up so I can stand on mountains. You raise me up to walk on stormy seas. I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be.
At the start of the project, pupils visited local heritage sites to learn about the mining industry. By speaking to retired miners, historians and tour guides, they learned all about coal in the South Wales valleys and how important it was in sculpting the area. They got a chance to visit a replica mine and saw firsthand the conditions in which many of their relatives would have worked. When the history was researched and the plans put in place, the pupils began to form ideas about how their film would look. To do this, they enlisted the help of professional animators to teach them about the planning and development stages of an animation. They got to research industry techniques and started to create their own hand-drawn characters and scenes. One of the most time-consuming elements of the project was creating each individual section by hand. All scenes, objects, and people had to be hand-drawn and coloured. Not only this, but each had to be cut into sections to allow it to be animated. Hundreds of drawings were developed, with many being cut and adjusted as needed. The pupils met twice or even 3 times a week for a few hours to ensure they completed this mammoth task. When the characters were made and the scenery drawn, it was time to bring the designs to life. Using professional equipment, the pupils learned how to create a stop-motion animation, working frame by frame with tiny movements in between. They painstakingly developed each animation sequence, bringing their flat imagery to life. Some scenes could take as much as 3 days to produce, with each individual movement having to be meticulously recorded, 1 photograph at a time. Over a course of 2 years, over 300,000 photographs were taken. When the characters and scenes moved as required, it was then time to put them all together. The green screens had to be removed and the sequences edited. More than 1,000 hours were spent digitally manipulating the footage, and following that, there were still sound effects and transitions to be put in place. Even then, it wasn't quite done. There was still filming and interviews to be recorded before the film could be completed.
This project has impacted my life, and it definitely works towards the things I want to do in later life. It also is a great opportunity to share the history of, our nation and the area.
At a young age, I've always liked the style of it, and I do think it can be a beautiful format to use.
I've always liked animation because it is different from real life, and it gives you the ability to stylize things and to change certain things and to make it look different or unique.
I'm interested in animation because sometimes an animation can tell a better story than when using live action.
It was just interesting to learn a lot of facts whilst doing the work, and I think because getting to animate something, it'll help me develop skills for when I leave school.
When I first came into the project, I was a bit nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't expect to really associate with a lot of people since I didn't know anyone really. When I actually got to spend more time in the group, I felt a lot more. I didn't expect it to be such an enjoyable experience. I managed to improve my skills in my confidence and my ability to make conversation and be with other people.
I was determined to come back and finish animation because I met a lot of new friends and I really enjoyed working together with them, and I also wanted to see the outcome of what it was going to be like.
It's got me a taste of what it's going to be like, and I still want to work in film, especially after this, even more now. It was important to me because I did want to know more about the Welsh culture that we had here, and especially what happened here in this school with the Albion disaster and everything.
We really enjoyed the scene where we animated the woman cleaning the kitchen and washing the dishes, because it was really satisfying to do, and the end product was really smooth.
I enjoyed making it as it helped me develop my animation skills.
When we did it, we just kind of took our time and made sure that we did a little bit at a time, so there wasn't any big jumps in there.
I worked with Jessica Hunt to make the rocks fall. Jess would animate the miner and I would do the rocks falling down. It was one of the longest ones I took to animate as well. I think it's because so much was going on in it, because we had the rocks falling down, we had the miner looking up, and then him dropping his pickaxe as he was looking up, so there was like more to do, if you get what I mean. Yeah, the Albion disaster is one of the most important parts, and it happened right here in this school as well, where our school was built.
I really enjoyed animating the pit pony walking scene because I've never animated a horse before and it's quite interesting. And we did look at several videos of horses walking. Well, you have to sort of keep track of all of the different parts of the horses moving, especially with the legs and the tail and the head.
My favourite scene was where the men in the orange jackets were going into the mines and saving or getting a miner from the mines who had been trapped in the rubble. I had drawn and coloured in the background of the outside of the mine, and I had helped animate the men taking the man out of the mine in the hammock, the sort of thing.
My favourite scene would be actually the first scene in the animation, because I really enjoy doing the walking cycle of the miners. Don't know why, I just really enjoy the walking cycle. If I were to do it again, I would probably change the colours of one of the miners, because he kind of looks like a ghost at the moment. But I do really enjoy the walking scene. It was fun to do, actually. It was short and it looped round, so it was short, so it wasn't as tedious as I thought it would be, and it was a good introduction to the animation. An animation is a big project. A big project is really hard to schedule if no one does their part. Everyone has to do their exact thing that they were told to do, but also keep their own twist on everything, just to keep it natural and personal, because you can't have a project with robots, you have to have a project with humans. So I would say just work as a team, do what you were told to do, but do it in your own way.